In this video, I'm breaking down 10 of my favorite shots I've ever captured. Each one has a story, why I framed it that way, the challenges behind it, and the simple gear I used to make it happen. Whether it's using natural light, improvising with what I had on hand, or leaning on careful composition, these shots prove that you don't always need a big crew or a truck full of gear to create something cinematic. Let's dive right in. This first shot is one of my favorite because it's probably the most technically challenging shot I've ever taken. This was done prior to drones having a hyperlapse button. And the reality is, even today, I don't use the automatic function on the drone to create hyperlapse. I think you get better results when you're using the manual settings. So this is done shooting a series of still images, long exposure images. If you look at the camera settings that I use, you can see that each shot was exposed for 5 seconds, which is a very long time, but that's what I needed in order to capture those beautiful light streak. Now, to make sure that the buildings in the background were not going to be blown out, I had to then compensate and close my aperture to an f6.3 to limit the amount of light that was coming into the sensor. And it's just a balancing out between those settings to find the right settings. And then in post-production, you combine all those single images into a single clip. Let's take a look at number 2. It's hard to get excited about maybe a simple podcast shot, but this one represents a lot of work. We had to set up a lot of equipment in order to balance the room that we were in. It was a great, beautiful location, but we had daylight coming in, we had 32K overhead light, we had a huge space, and so we needed to address a lot of things. I loved the depth that we had, and I wanted to take advantage of that depth, but I had to then create a lot of different lighting environment in order to make it happen. We have an artificial key light that we use on top of the windows that's bringing a lot of daylight, and then we created this edge light that you see here. And we had to use a bunch of flags in order to make sure that the light from this, I believe it's a 600, was gonna stay and not spill all over his face. We didn't want any spillage here so that we would still have some contrast between his key side and his fill side. We wanted that 600 to only hit the edges here to create that nice edge light. And then in the background, I had to raise levels in the lobby so that we could see this beautiful staircase and just kind of create the depth. So we have a 1200 with a giant softbox pointing straight at the ceiling to raise the level of that room. The other challenge that we had was right behind his shoulder on the other side here, there's a staircase. And it was very dark. We were able to use 2 lights that we can control. This is the aperture little cube that we can control, and then we put an aperture light bulb on this practical. And by raising their intensity and also placing them in different level of the staircase, we were able to then achieve the levels that we wanted. This next shot was a great project. I wanted to create a low light, warm, cozy scene in the middle of broad daylight. And so the challenge was to first block as much of the daylight as we could, change and adjust our camera settings to make sure that we stayed in really low light conditions, and then use a key light, our top light, and a practical in order to achieve the mood that we wanted. We mixed different color temperatures. So like this is our top light at 32K. Our key light was set to 46K, and that was done to then achieve the right colors on our subject. So we can see levels here coming from the key light, and then our top light coming down is providing levels here and here. And then our practical is shining levels on the curtains and on the little coffee table next to her. This shot is an old one, but a good one. We knew we wanted to shoot this scene at that particular time to use the sun as our backlight. And it's creating all those little levels that you see on the players in the dugout, on the helmets, this whole edge light here, all of that is coming from the sun itself. And so we wanted to just be able to use that. The hard part when you're doing outdoor lighting, when you're using the sun like this, is now you need to then pump a lot of levels onto your subject, or else they're going to be completely black out. And so we had to use two 4x4 mirrors in order to then use the sunlight and send it back. One mirror for her, the batter, and one mirror for the dugout. Probably the one thing that I could have done a little bit better is move the mirror for her to be more on the side instead of coming it more straight onto her. It looks a little bit unnatural because as a viewer, you can see that the sun is over here and it's coming this way, and all of a sudden this side of her face is all lit, which is not really natural looking. So I think it would have been a little bit better if this mirror would have been moved maybe on this side of the field so that the light would have come this way. I shoot a lot of interviews, and this is one of my favorite as far as the end result, the look and feel that we were able to achieve. We knew we wanted something very contrasty. So we started with the blackout room. We turned off all the light, shut all the blinds, just to make sure we had no interference with any non-controllable lighting. And then we went to work, and we built this scene by first exposing for our shadows. And so I set my camera settings to make sure that I exposed for those levels. And then the rest was then placing lights and turning them on and adjusting their intensity so that we have enough levels on some of those small details, and punching small little light sources onto objects to make sure that they would come to life so that we could see them in the background. And then as far as our main interviewee, then it was a main key light and adjusting the levels to make sure that we had what we needed. And then on this side, we have a little neg to make sure we created enough contrast between his key side and his fill side. And we also use a little top light to get some levels and separation around his head. This next shot is also an older shot, but I really love it. I didn't use any lighting or anything. This shot is only a good shot because of the camera movement and the composition. I didn't know exactly what I was gonna do, and I just told the driver, like, just keep coming, and I want you to stop at this point. Don't worry about what I'm doing. I will make sure I don't get run over. And you just keep coming and just stop on this particular spot. When I work gimbal, I love low shots. And so I started with the camera really low to the ground. And then as the car approached, I start lifting the camera over the hood and then back down on the other side. And I didn't really think about it. And then when I saw that on the way down, I was hitting the headlight, I just saw it as a perfect way for me to kind of transition between the establishing shot of the car and then the next shot of the person coming out of the vehicle. And so I probably did that move maybe 3 times with the driver to just have him come back, do the exact same move, and just make sure I landed it the way I wanted to. But that was it. And then in post-production, I just ramped up the move to give it that feel that we wanted for the final product. This shot is part of a project where I ever shot anamorphic, and I wanted to take advantage of the anamorphic lenses. And we're in this library, and there's a lot of challenges as far as the lighting is concerned. We use as much of the daylight as possible and only use 2 artificial light, the main key light. And we also placed a very harsh backlight on him. And that's what's creating those flares and that look that you see here. So not only is it providing levels here on the side as an edge light, but with the anamorphic lens, creating some of those flares, we let some of that light bleed into the camera to then create the final look and feel that we wanted. This shot is near and dear to my heart because it was part of a project on a story I was telling about Pat Tillman. And I didn't do anything unique to that shot. This is all about being aware as a cinematographer of your environment, the timing of it, to then be able to capture something. I'd never been to that pool before. I didn't do any location scout. I just show up in the morning. The first thing I noticed was this is a heated pool. There's smoke everywhere, which is awesome. And I could tell that the sun was starting to creep from behind that wall. It was starting to come out. And so it was waiting for the right time to then be able to capture the shot. And so we wanted to set the exposure for the swimmer. We don't care if the sun is going to blow out, that's totally fine. And then be intentional about the camera movement. It is a motivated movement. I have to move the camera if I want to keep track of that swimmer. But I also saw this ladder, and I knew that by moving past the ladder, I would create some depth and something interesting. And then the fact that this is shot at 240 frames a second doesn't hurt either to see all that beautiful water. I don't do still photography often, but this was one of those where I just had a blast. And it's again being at the right place at the right time, but also understanding certain photography concept in order to then capture the light that you see. No artificial lighting here. It was me seeing that very harsh light coming through the window into a room that's already pretty dark to begin with, because they didn't have any artificial lighting in the room anyway. But it's to see that light coming in, see how it's hitting her face, and then adjusting my camera settings so that my shadows are on the verge of being crushed. I wanted my blacks to be very, very deep so that we have a very high contrast between the window and the rest of the room, and then position myself in a way that that light coming from the window would then gradually fall off her face to the darker side. So you have a natural gradient from her key side to her fill side. This is definitely my favorite shot of all time. And it's probably that because it totally happened by accident. We were working on a documentary, a historical documentary inside of this small little museum. It's like an old farmhouse. And I kept seeing this light that was coming through the window, and the sun wasn't there yet, but it was moving towards that window. And I remember seeing this hat in the previous room in the glass casing. The moment I saw the sunlight coming through that window, I just knew I needed to go get that hat and place it on the little chair. And this is another example of no lighting. It's all about placement and camera settings. So we exposed for the shadows underneath this table here, wanted to bring those shadows as close to black as possible, and then let the natural light come into the room and move the chair and place the hat in a way that only a small section of the hat was going to be hit by the light and probably blown out. But then it would create this natural gradient from highlights to shadow on that hat. And what it does is it then brings the hat into the foreground. It really makes people look at the hat. It focuses people on that hat. And we placed the little clock here too in the sunlight, and part of that chair as well. We moved all of that so that there would be those little bright spots that were reminders of the time past. And that's my breakdown of 10 of my best shots. Each one a reminder that great cinematography doesn't always come from having the most gear, but from being intentional with every decision. Hopefully seeing how I approach these moments give you some inspiration for your own work. Now, if you're serious about taking your cinematography to the next level, check out my one-on-one coaching session. We'll focus on your specific goals, your style, and the exact area that will make the biggest impact. Thanks for watching, and happy filming.